It is really puzzling to me that having just buried one monster, the Soviet Union, another remarkably similar one, the European Union, is being built.
We have not successfully rolled back the frontiers of the state in Britain, only to see them reimposed at a European level, with a European superstate exercising a new dominance from Brussels.
Because where Europe is today, ladies and gentlemen, is a very, very dark and dangerous place.
The Soviet Union was created by coercion and very often with a military occupation. The European Union is being created admittedly not by armed force, but by coercion and economic bullying.
The European Union is not about the trade issue. The European Union was set up by the founding fathers, an important man called Spinelli, an Italian, who was an ex-communist. He designed the Maastricht and the Single European Act. Why? Because he said this is a political project. It is about bringing the nations of Europe closer and closer together to create a place called Europe. And the design of this was such that politicians who come and go, he said, could not actually override the decisions of the bureaucracy, because otherwise we would never get there.
And certainly we in Britain would fight attempts to introduce collectivism and corporatism at the European level.
And how ironic to see the Russian Prime Minister, Dmitry Medvedev, compare your actions and say, I can only compare it to some of the decisions taken by the Soviet authorities.
In the Soviet Union, they told us we needed a federal state to avoid war. In the European Union, they are telling you exactly the same thing. In short, the same ideology underpins both systems. The EU is an old Soviet model presented in Western guise.
This is a political and not an economic enterprise. That is what ever closer union is all about.
Certainly we want to see Europe more united and with a greater sense of common purpose. But it must be in a way which preserves the different traditions, parliamentary powers, and sense of national pride in one's own country. For these have been the source of Europe's vitality through the centuries.
The Soviet Union was governed by 15 unelected people who appointed each other and who were not accountable to anyone. The European Union is governed by 24 people who appoint each other, meet in secret, and are not accountable to anyone, and whom we cannot sack.
But what is abundantly clear is that the EU as we know it now is profoundly undemocratic. Indeed, one of the most unattractive aspects of the European integrationist movement is its contempt for democracy. The bureaucracy know what is best for the people, and if the people have the temerity to vote the wrong way in a referendum, they're frequently told that they must vote again.
But during my time in office, I've realised actually that the European Union prevents us being a proper, self-governing country.
Sovereignty. This is not something that is possessed by politicians. Sovereignty is people's ability, the ability of the public to control their lives, and to make sure that the people they elect are able to pass the laws that matter to them.
And what we've seen is a steady erosion of power, with more and more being transferred to Brussels. So that now, time and time again, we get told we have to do things because the EU tells us, even when we know it's not in our national interests. So I want a new relationship where we take power back to our Parliament and we agree the areas where we should cooperate.
If the European Union brings forward a law that would cost jobs in this country, we do not still have the power to say no to that. And I think in a sovereign country you should be able to do that.
Whatever the social cost, whatever the economic cost, we must continue with the project. And in maintaining this project, what they have done is they have literally stripped out all forms of democracy from those countries.
One of the problems with the European Union is that you can throw out the government, but some of the rules will remain the same, no matter how you vote. And that impairs our democracy and its ability to function.
I mean, tax rates, for instance, VAT we have to impose on, we're not allowed to exempt certain products. Animal welfare. If we wanted to prevent live animal exports, we can't do it because it's a breach of European law. An awful lot of regulations affecting business. There is a whole plethora of this body of the European Commission that churns out directives. And once those are agreed, even if we say that we don't agree with them in this country, we are still, time and again, we lose out and are told that we have to impose them whether we like it or not.
I think the decisions that the European Court of Justice takes, that we can't appeal or change, should be taken here in a way that ensures that we're accountable to the people who send us to Westminster.
One might say that the EU has an elected parliament. Well, the Soviet Union had a parliament of a sort too, the Supreme Soviet. We just rubber-stamped the Politburo decisions, pretty much like the European Parliament does, where speaking time in the chamber is limited within each group and often amounts to 1 minute per speaker.
It's ultimately a question of our national sovereignty, the ability to take decisions for ourselves.
When we've objected to policies in the European Council, we have been outvoted, time after time after time.
Returning powers to the people that we can hold to account at a general election is good for our democracy, rather than vesting those powers in distant institutions in Brussels over which we have limited influence.
It is the case that when it comes to everything from agriculture and fisheries, through to the environment, through to value-added tax, through to actually really important decisions on security and our borders, on surveillance, all of these areas are governed by European rulings and European law.
But the fundamental difference is that unnecessary or undesirable indigenous regulation can be repealed, as it was during the 1980s when I was in government. By contrast, EU regulation is untouchable.
So ultimately, in areas that any nation state, any country, would consider as essential to its identity, and areas that determine whether or not people are going to keep their jobs or lead fulfilling lives, the European Union can outvote Britain, and critically, the European Court of Justice can hand down rulings against which there is no appeal and which ultimately ensure that what politicians in this country do is dictated by foreign judges.
We believe the best people to govern Britain are the British people themselves, and we should do so through the ballot box, proudly through the Westminster Parliament. It's clear.